What the f?
It's like someone you're attracted to in like a really strong way, but they're not your typical type. And they have things about them that aren't like traditionally beautiful, but you find them really attractive, those aspects of them. That's how I feel about The Dark Tower. It's
So, I just I finished The Dark Tower. I read the last book. The Dark Tower is under my belt. Apparently there's another thing that's related to the series I have to read, but whatever. Everything in the Stephen King universe apparently revolves around this freaking book series, so I need to read the entire Stephen King universe in reality to fully understand it all, and I'm not still there quite, but I'm trying. This is going to be my rant review of The Dark Tower, because this book, it's like breaking me. Okay, so I just finished this. I'm not going to release this video for a few days because I have scheduling, but I need to get all my thoughts out here because, my God. So, okay, spoiler warning, but not yet. Let me just say, Stephen King ended The Dark Tower. You know when you're trying to be creative and you have your first idea and you're like, nah, that's crazy. Don't do that. That's too outside the box. And so you go with like a safer thing. That's like a really common thing in the creative process. The ending of The Dark Tower is that first idea, and it's on the Stephen King level of like, yeah, screw it. Let's do it like that. And it left me like my pants out of my mind like, what? Okay, so how do I review this spoiler free for the beginning of the video? I don't even know. What I will say is I understand why the ending of this series has some fans going, magnificent, brilliant, genius, and it has other people remarkably unsatisfied and angry. I fall into the former category. I think it's brilliant. I think it's wonderful, but I completely sympathize with the latter. And I don't think it was a flawless ending. There's especially one showdown with a semi-built-up villain that was stupendously anticlimactic. But overall, I think the way the ending resolved with the companions and with Roland is nothing short of next level. The pacing of Dark Tower is probably something that's just, it's from beginning to end, just wild and all over the place. And if you are a Stephen King fan, if you're someone who enjoys his subversion of what you expect, his refusal to bow down to the typical writing whims, then I think you will love The Dark Tower, because it's just so bendy and crazy and wild, and I'm so in love with how it ended while also being so frustrated and now having to reread this series one day because there's obviously going to be a million, billion, trillion signs pointing to how it ended. So now I'm going to get into my like vague spoilers. I'm not going to talk about the actual ending and the big spoiler of how The Dark Tower finishes, but I'm going to talk about story elements for books leading up to this book and this actual book itself. And so in the last one, the Song of Susanna, well, no, let's go back to where this really started breathing and becoming a thing. In Wolves of the Kala, Stephen King's Salem's Lot makes an appearance, as well as a character from Salem's Lot, Father Cullen, and they are like, oh my god, this is the author, which establishes for us, the reader, that Stephen King exists in this Stephen King world, which is incredible. Oh my god, so they have the ability to be in the world of the author creating them. And then in the next book, Song of Susanna, they meet him, and they're like, you gotta write these books, because that's our reality, do this for us. And they're all around him, and he's there. And in this book, Stephen King incorporates a real-life event from his life. For those of you who don't know, tragically, Stephen King was hit by a car. But in our world, it didn't kill him. It's implied that in this one, it would have, but our characters, the characters he's writing, save him, which means Stephen King saved his own life by having characters come in and save him from a thing that would have killed him. He somehow... Okay. So is there some exterior greater force, Ka, that's coercing Stephen King into writing the Stephen King universe? That's the lore within the Stephen King universe now, because the Dark Tower is connected to the rest of Stephen King's writing, which means this Stephen King we just saw was essentially the god of this universe who's being coerced into writing it somehow, because he doesn't seem to be in full control of his writing, or at least that's implied. All right. And then, okay, so back to spoiler-free review. It's written like Stephen King writes books. It's next-level writing. His prose are phenomenal. His handling of tone is basically unrivaled. The pacing's its biggest flaw. I give the pacing like a 4 out of 10 for the series as a whole, and for this last book, like a 6 out of 10. Pacing is not Stephen King's strong suit, but I loved the ending, and that's gonna be something that a lot of people, boy, are they gonna be divided on. I can say, as a whole series, the characters and relationships are maybe Stephen King's best ever because he has so much time to work with them and develop them. It's really, really impressive to see him start with a character who's such a trope and add just slivers of nuance in each step of the journey that by the end of it make Roland, the gunslinger, one of the most understood Stephen King characters I have come across. That was awesome. And his companions, especially Eddie and Susanna, to me, just are beacons of how to develop characters through relationships, through their reactions to these severe events. Their resolutions were very cathartic, and especially how it all kind of wraps up and then unwraps up. Won't get into that right now. But so before giving us the real ending to this series, Stephen King writes you should put it down and not read it, because this is not the ending you're gonna want, which is because we're reading the Stephen King who we know within this universe is writing this book. It's the Stephen King that we met in the book who's writing that. In reality, it's our Stephen King, so are they one and the same? No, they must be different, I think. But okay, I have to get into spoilers here. If you haven't read Dark Tower and you're a fantasy fan, I think this is gonna be in my must-reads for fantasy forever, because I love stuff that's able to be in the genre, but be extraordinarily different. And my, oh my, oh my, does this accomplish that. Spoiler territory, full on out, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so before we get to the actual ending, let's talk about the Crimson King and Roland's spider werewolf son thing. Spider? Yeah. So the ending with the Crimson King, I didn't find to be fully cathartic. I thought that was kind of a waste of something that's been built up for so much. It was very King-esque, so I'm fine with it in that sense, but I would have liked something a bit more action-packed. Stephen King can write action. He can do interesting action scenes. We've seen that in other books, but here that just didn't really happen. But we did get some action around the spawn of Roland and the Crimson King and Susanna. And that was where I actually had a lot more fun. I guess you could put the word fun on there as a label with this book, because that was creepy, it was intense, it takes out Randall freaking Flagg. That was not where I was thinking this was going to end up going, but Randall Flagg, the big villain of the Stephen King universe in many ways. I mean, this guy has had hands in some of Stephen King's greatest stories, is eaten by this guy, and that's so King as well, just being like, oh, you think, yeah, no, pff, done, not a big deal, like that. Fantastic. Okay, so getting back to the actual ending, we need to fast forward here to the actual ending because I have to talk about this. So we're in a loop. He's put back at the beginning with a new item. He's got a horn now, so it's implied he's been doing this for God knows how long. It's like a cyclical part of the world that this is going to keep happening. But it's also different because now he has the horn, which means that this will eventually possibly come to an end. There is an outcome. It's not zero. It's not a zero outcome game. There's not going to keep going to the same point and back. There are other paths for Roland to take, and maybe this next one will be it. We've seen him grow so much in this last adventure that maybe he's going to get back there. We see everyone's memories are being lost, so maybe he's often come in contact with the same companions, but I don't think so. I'm not... Okay, this might be the only completed fantasy series where I'm like, yeah, I need you to make another one. Like, there needs to be a second Dark Tower series, because I need, not even like, okay, in the second one, you need to finish it, like, make it so it's resolute. I get that Stephen King doesn't want that. I just want to see how different it can be. So I'm so stuck here. If you can't tell, I may have some very different opinions on the Dark Tower in a few weeks. If you make me sit down and really process this more, I may eventually go, no, I really didn't like this, and I really did like that. But I can say unequivocally, the Dark Tower pulled a lot of emotion on me and had some majorly landing holy shit moments. And for that reason, I respect what's accomplished here. Again, I completely get the people who don't like this loop ending, and it bothers them. I fully sympathize with that being a bit too much for you, not something that you find satisfying as a reader, but I do. because that's kind of what I want out of a Stephen King book. I want something that's going to go in a direction I'll never call, but is definitely planned for and meant to be from the beginning, how he pictured it ending. And this to me felt like that, because as soon as I realized what was happening, because you're shown it, I realized there has to be a million things that are pointing this from the beginning. So I need to go back and reread this. The Dark Tower is just near perfection in many ways. It has its flaws. It has its glaring flaws, but it's one of those it's like someone you're attracted to in like a really strong way, but they're not your typical type. And they have things about them that aren't like traditionally beautiful, but you find them really attractive, those aspects of them. That's how I feel about the Dark Tower. It's like the sexiest person I'm attracted to that's so against like my typical type or like societal norms of beauty. That is the Dark Tower, and I'm pretty confident in that review. Let me know what you think of the Dark Tower in the comments down below, because I'm processing and I need to know other people who have sat back and processed this, what they think about it. Do they love it? Do they hate it? Let me know right down there, because I'm gonna be thinking about this for a long time. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all.